Rachel Hala CM Nights Jelicha, Sahanap, Tenetsine, just Lasenef the Saanich, a Wathafla Bayat Lungs. I'm Sahanap is my co-Salish name, and I'm honored to be here coming to you from the beautiful Chocolate Village in the Saanich territory. And I'd like to thank all of the people who spoke before me. I shared all of their wisdom and their experiences, and I think it's an important opportunity to reflect that it doesn't seem to matter where you come to this beautiful country from. You tend to, and there tends to be those stories and those experiences that are quite frankly devastating and embarrassing, and that as we stand and sit together today in recognition of International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, it's a moment for us to pause and to reflect on how we treat each other and how we engage with each other, and how we can come together to create a more just, inclusive, open society. And I was just about to put diverse in there, but the diversity is already here. The diversity is in our communities and in our society, and it is a immature society that we have that doesn't understand how to reflect that the power and the strength that comes from that diversity to the fullest potential. And I think that is the challenge that we have to do together. I was born in the Royal Jubilee Hospital, and I was brought home as a baby to Chocolate, to the Sartlip First Nation in 1976. And it was a much different time back then. A much different place. What's not too different are the rules that govern this Indian Reserve. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that as our governments in Canada and the government of British Columbia are working to eliminate racial discrimination and working to address the rising instances in our society that we're seeing of anti-Asian, anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic, anti-Black, anti-Indigenous sentiments that have come with COVID, but actually that have been here in our society all along, that we recognize and acknowledge first and foremost that it is within the very fiber of the governments that I'm talking about. This racism is systemic to the governments, and discrimination and bias are systemic within the government structures that have been established. You'd have to look no further than the Indian Act and the Indian Reserve systems in this country to see just to the extent at which racism has been embedded in our colonial government structure. This is the challenge that we have in front of us, is while the communities, like everybody gathered here together today, work towards coming together and building relationship and building community, it is the responsibility of those of us elected officials to be working tirelessly and courageously and fearlessly to root out and to create, to root out racism, discrimination, and bias within the institutions of government. And it's our job to not accept anything other than complete and total work on this. It's important to acknowledge that the Indian Act that created a very unjust society for Indigenous people still is in existence as federal legislation today. There have been minor adjustments, tinkering around the edges, but it still is in large part in place in our country. And so while we often look and compare ourselves favorably to the nations around us, and how we are, and we tend in our country to elevate Canada as being much better than those who are much worse. I think it's important to acknowledge that we still have many, many kilometers to. One of the fundamental pieces of work that I've done since getting elected in 2017 was work that's very personal to me and to my family and to our community, and that is the work to legislate the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And what's important to acknowledge here is that that is simply the first step, and in getting that law in place. Now we have the and that was hard work. But now we have collectively, as MLAs in the legislature, the work ahead of us to on the action side of this. And I think over the past couple of weeks, I've raised some issues in the legislature that to demonstrate that while we are comfortable using the language of reconciliation, our government institutions have yet to embrace the action of reconciliation to the level at which I think is important. And so we have a situation in which our treaty protected hunting rights and treaty protected fishing rights, while they continue to be defended successfully in the Supreme Court of Canada, we still have government institutions and government agencies arresting hunters and forcing them into the courts to redefend rights. And this is very much an indication that we have a long way to go in the work that we have to do in our government institutions. And so I am very thankful for the invitation today to be a part of this this really important work that's happening here, and would much prefer to be doing this and building relationships and fellowship in person. That's always my preference, and will only accept Zoom because of the conditions that we're all living in now. However, I do look forward to the opportunity to continue to build relationships with my brothers and sisters from around the world. And one thing that I know in my world is that while I can speak very clearly and articulately about the experience of growing up here on an Indian reserve, I can also relate to the stories of my brothers and sisters from around the world whose teachings I think help us understand this place that we live even better. And so I'm just going to end with this. I want to raise my hands in support of my colleague, Michael Lee, who's representing here the BC Liberal Party, and as well my friend and colleague Rashna Singh, who I've worked with for the past 3.5 years. And in fact, we were neighbors in the legislature for the past 3.5 years, Rashna. And I want to lift Rashna up today because as the person that has been given the responsibility to lead this really incredibly important work, I think it's important that while we may find times of agreement and times of disagreement, that Rashna needs to know that from my perspective, I am here to support her work. It is the most important work that we can be doing in this next number of months and years ahead. And I really look forward to working in support of Rashna and her colleagues that have embraced this opportunity, and always look to be a productive member of the legislature to address the systemic racism that exists, the systemic discrimination that exists, and the systemic biases that exist in our colonial governance structure that we've inherited, so that we can leave a place that is better, more informed in creating better decisions for all British Columbians today and in the future. Hajj Kasiyam, thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. And I have to commend you for saying the words that you did about Rachna and the work she's doing. Again, partisanship is not an issue in racial discrimination, right? Differences of party ideas and thinking and strategies for improving the country are one thing, but when we're working together to end women being pulled out of cars and beaten on the streets of Edmonton, Black people being 20 times more likely to be shot to death by police in Toronto, people, all over our country, Indigenous people being murdered and no one investigating. The Highway of Tears, which I drove on, and I am horrified to think that such a thing can exist in Canada. These instances of brutal racial discrimination, they go beyond any party affiliation. And I commend you for recognizing that and offering your support to your colleagues in working together to eliminate that from our country. So thank you very much for that. And as you started, something came to my mind. It's a Muslim prayer in these kind of situations, and I just wanted to quickly, very, very quickly share it with you. So Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. So this is in the Quran, and what it means is that by the passage of time, humanity indeed is at a loss, except for those who believe and do righteous deeds and advise each other to truth and advise each other to perseverance. So I commend you again, Adam, for your perseverance, your speaking of truth, and your righteous good deeds. Thank you very much.